with that being said, I want to move on and introduce our speaker of today. I'm very happy to welcome Abhishek. He's a postdoctoral fellow at MIT. He completed his PhD at UC Berkeley, and he's interested in building systems that can leverage reinforcement learning algorithms to solve robotics problems. He will start as an assistant professor at the University of Washington here in Seattle in the fall of 2022. So this is very exciting because his research directions are amazing, and we have so much to learn from him. Today, the session is really a live Q&A session. And if you have not done so, there should be in the chat a form so you can submit your questions. But we will also be inviting you to ask questions on the fly. So it's going to be very informal. Me and Miguel will be moderating it, and we'll be pulling out your questions. But right now, what I really want to do is to give the stage to Abhishek to start kicking out this discussion.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Patricia. Hi, everyone. My name is Abhishek. I am currently a postdoc at MIT working with Russ, Tedrake, and Pulkit, Agrawal. And I finished my PhD kind of recently from Berkeley, working with Pieter and Sergey on reinforcement learning for robotics. And yeah, I'm excited to start at UW in a few months, 2 months. And happy to share some of my experiences applying for jobs last year. So I'm fairly informal with the way that I discuss things. So I'll try to go over the process really quickly and things that I found to be helpful, and interrupt me if you have questions in between, and otherwise we'll have questions at the end. Cool. So I applied, I guess, in the last cycle, which would be I started preparing things in summer 2020, which was a weird time to prepare things. But I think basically I applied in December 2020. Um, uh, and I started preparing things maybe May 2020. And so the process kind of starts by figuring out if you're ready to apply. So talk to your advisors and talk to your mentors and talk to senior collaborators and seeing if you have, a body of work that is able to tell a convincing story. So the main things to look for is, do you have a set of publications and a set of results, or close to a set of results that can tell some convincing story? It doesn't have to be fully complete. It just needs to be able to tell some convincing story. And don't let imposter syndrome be an impediment to you applying. Trust your advisors, and they'll kind of tell you if you're ready to apply. And then you want to figure that out around summertime, and then do a bunch of pre-work beforehand. So things that are good to do in the year before are like apply for fellowships. So apply for things like the Facebook or Google or Microsoft fellowships. Those are great to have. Or apply for the EECS Rising Stars, RSS Pioneers, like programs like that are nice to have. I didn't do that, but I think it's useful to have. And then if you haven't done things like teaching or organized workshops or things like that, it's good to do that a bit early because those are important for your application. So I would do that pre-work either in the summer or a little bit before, so you're not like doing that at the last minute. So yeah, those are some things you want to do beforehand. And once you're kind of preparing things, the first thing to do is, I think, write a research statement. So maybe sometime in the summer, you want to try and write like a semi-formal or informal to semi-formal type of research statement, just outlining what a story might be that ties together a lot of your research. So for me, at least, I had a very haphazard path through research. I did like 5 projects in this and 5 projects in that, and it wasn't tied together. And so writing the research statement in the summer kind of lets you focus in on one story that is convincing. And then it lets you figure out what the missing pieces are, right? So you want to write the story. So if you're missing experimental results, you kind of figure that out. If you're missing theory things, you kind of figure that out. And you have enough time to actually write a paper about it or get some results before you apply. And so I would do that early summer. I think that's super helpful. And when you're writing this research statement, one thing that's important to remember is that you're not appealing to a super narrow audience. You want to appeal to the whole CS department or the whole, E or MECI or whichever department you're applying to. And so you want to make sure that you're not writing it like a research paper, but instead more like something that has a broader appeal. And so you want to make sure that it has broad appeal while also having some depth. So you want to make sure that the problem space has broad appeal and your contributions are easily understandable to a broader audience, but then show that you've done papers or done a series of papers that have technical depth. And that is like kind of tricky to get right. So you want to do it early in the summer so you have time to iterate on it. And also the useful thing while trying to pick out a story for yourself is that you want to be the person who tells your story, not just the most generic story, because the way that admissions or not admissions, like a faculty hiring committee would look at your application is they would see whether you are like the person in the next K years who would be pushing that field forward. And so pick the story that is unique to you, not just the one that is like the hottest. Yeah, so that I think that's quite tricky to get right, especially for people who work in the middle of areas. Like it's important that you pick something that has broad appeal. So I would start that early. Um, and then the next bit that you have to do is start finding recommenders. And this is often tricky and tough. But I had 6 recommenders, and I'd recommend somewhere between 4 to 6. I think that's a safe number. But you want to start reaching out to them fairly early because faculty are busy and they're bad with the email, and you don't want to leave that to the last minute. And so I think everyone has a different opinion on what type of recommenders are good, but from what I've seen and what I found to be successful, you want to have some mix of people who work really closely with you. So people like your advisors or senior collaborators, or if you've done an internship with a faculty, something like that, and some mix of people who have not worked with you. So senior faculty from other departments or other universities who can speak to your work but have not directly worked with you. Reason being that they don't have vested interest in your success, right? And so it's useful to have people who can comment on you from a somewhat objective perspective. And it's nice to have spread across institutions because there's not institutional bias as much. Um, and and then generally, the more senior the faculty, the the like better it reflects on your application, because usually because they have more calibration. Um, it's not the best system, but I think right now the more senior and well-known your faculty recommenders are, the more impactful your letters will be. And so I would recommend, just like, even if it feels intimidating, just like cold email people who you think might know your work. And you'll find that surprisingly, some of them will reply and write letters for you. And that's nice to have. And one really important thing while doing recommendations is make sure that you give your recommenders an easy way to say no, because it's really, really bad to have a lukewarm or bad letter. And so make sure that you phrase your emails like, can you write me a very, very strong letter, or can you like speak very strongly to my abilities? And it's no problem if you cannot, I understand, or something of that nature, which allows them to opt out easily. But yeah, do that early. Another thing I found that was helpful for me, I think, was having recommenders from slightly different areas. So not everyone was machine learning, not everyone was robotics. There was a language person, an evolutionary algorithms person. And so I thought that showed like the ability to collaborate with different areas a little more. Okay, so once you found your recommenders, the next thing to do, I think, is make a list of places that you'd apply to. And I kind of divided into 3 types of places, like dream, reach, and safe. Right, so dream is like, okay, like MIT or Stanford or something, like where it's hard to predict, but might as well apply. Reach would be things which you think you have some chance of getting in, but it's going to be a reach. And then safe is where you'd be happy to go, but you think it's a high likelihood of getting in. And I put most of your schools in reach and a few in dream and safe. But I didn't apply to any schools that I would not consider going to, just because, yeah, I didn't want to apply to a school and then have to say no. Um, so I would go through, and the other important thing is every school has multiple departments, and each of them have different applications most of the time, and so make a list of all the schools, all the applications. Some of them have different dates, some of them have different websites, and it's just a huge pain. But academic jobs online is great and Interfolio is great. But besides that, there's still a lot of other applications. And so make a big spreadsheet with all the deadlines, all the requirements, all the departments. Um, and I applied to, I think, 16, 16 or 17 places. And most people I've talked to apply from somewhere between there to somewhere between 10 to 30. That's kind of the range that I've seen. Um, but yeah, it depends on person to person. Um, okay, so once you found the places that you like to apply to, the next thing to do is start drafting all your statements, so your teaching, DEI, and research statements. I started super late, but it was very stressful. Uh, so avoid doing that and start maybe early fall or something. And it's really useful to get successful examples of statements. So I'm happy to share my statements after this, but it's really useful to get a couple of different successful statements, just to see what works and what patterns you usually see. So I can go over the statements really quickly. So a teaching statement, you want to showcase experience with teaching, but also like interest and really, really genuine excitement about teaching. And then you want to talk about also mentoring experience, excitement for mentoring, and a little bit about your teaching and mentoring style. In your DEI statement, which is also super important, you want to discuss why you think DEI is important, which elements you think are particularly important, which elements you're uniquely qualified or uniquely interested in working on. And it's really useful to be very concrete in terms of efforts that you've taken on in the past and efforts that you want to take on in the future. I wrote a very vague statement at first, but then I got a lot of advice to make it concrete. And I think Berkeley has a nice rubric that tells you exactly how to do this. Um, so that's your DEI statement. And your research statement is tough to write, but it's 3 or 4 pages. Um, and I kind of divide it into the first page is why should people care about what you do? And the last page is what you're going to do in the future. And the pages in between are just justification that your past research kind of connects to both why we should care about what you do and what you want to do in the future. Important part here is that the readers are not going to be only in your sub area. So make sure to not use a lot of jargon. Use a lot of pictures, make the broader impact of your work clear, make it clear which areas it connects to. And it's better to be more inspiring than less in your research statement. So it's okay to be grandiose, but it's not okay to be like lackluster, I think. And this is really tough to get right. So like get feedback from different faculty and even your peers or your friends and family, just to make sure it's understandable and it's impactful. And yeah, and don't be afraid to bold things and use pictures and do whatever it takes to convey the message. Okay, so that's kind of the application process. You apply, I think December 1st for most applications, and then few plus minus. And then you just kind of sit around till late January. And in late January, you start getting some calls for phone interviews. But before that, one thing that some people recommend is to do talks in the fall to increase your visibility. And so giving like seminars or group meeting talks at other universities kind of gets you a little bit more visibility. Some people say it's great, some people say it's not. I did a couple. I think the useful thing is basically if you've given those talks, your name sticks out in a pool of applicants. If you give a good talk, but it could also go the other way, in that if you give a bad talk, you're instantly out. So it's a risk. Yeah, okay. But after you apply, you wait until late January, you start getting phone interviews. And I'd say typical hit rate is somewhere between 50 to 60% from places you'd apply to, or that's what I had. And the phone interviews are like short 30-minute interviews with usually a panel of faculty from the department. And they'd ask you, what is your give a really short pitch of your past research, give a short pitch of your future research, talk about what DEI initiatives you want to take on, talk about what other faculty you're interested in working with, and they'll ask you like a few questions. It's not a very deep dive, but they mostly want to see whether you're like an exciting, inspiring person to talk to, right? And so you want to prepare. It's I think a lot of people dismiss this, but I think it's important to prepare with someone else who's like doing a mock interview for you. Otherwise, it's easy to like just kind of be dismissive. And so, yeah, don't take that seriously. And do a bit of department research beforehand to know what the faculty are in the department and so on. Okay. After that, the next thing to do is prepare your job talk. Um, the weird thing about your job talk is not like a usual technical talk. It's um, kind of more high level than a usual technical talk. You want to appeal to the whole department while still showing technical depth, which is tough. But the important bits are the motivation and the future work, and making sure that every technical section keeps tying back to the story. Like, I think that's the really important bit. Um, and so keep it to 40 to 45 minutes, three technical sections, go deep in one of the technical sections and not so much in the other two. And make sure that your talk runs at two levels, one level for the experts who want to know that you're technically deep, and one level for just general people from the department who want to know that your work is exciting and is something that we should invest in as a department. um, I'm happy to answer more questions about that. And then full interviews would come in late February, early March, kind of, and go through up till like late April sometimes. But basically, they're 1 or 2 day events where you just talk to a ton of different faculty, sometimes up to 20, sometimes 8 or 9. That's a range. But the goal is really to assess whether you are, you're an exciting colleague to have in the department. So someone who can connect with a lot of different areas which are not your specialty. So you'll have a lot of meetings with people from completely not your specialty. So I had a lot of meetings with people from crypto or comp bio or um, NLP and vision are kind of close, but um, other areas as well, systems even. And I think it's useful to do a lot of homework beforehand. So they'll get your schedule beforehand, know who you're meeting, do research on, read a few of their papers, understand what they work on, form connections with your work, and then in your meetings, be really excited to explore those connections. Um, so I think that's really important, and it takes a lot of time. So devote enough time between your interviews so that you have enough time to do research on each of the schools and each of the departments. Um, and yeah, the student meeting is also super important. To be attentive to student needs, understand what works for them, what doesn't work for them, ask them a lot of questions, engage with them actively. And some places have a chalk top type thing where you do things on the board, but not everywhere. Um, okay, and lastly, once you are done with your interviews, if you're successful, usually the department chair will call you in a couple weeks to a month. And then after that is the nice part, I guess, where they bring you out for a second visit, and you can like judge culture, you can judge fit, you can judge how happy the students are, how happy the faculty are, a little bit of work-life balance, like those kinds of things. So I think in your second visit, it's important to figure out life things because you're there for life and not for just work. Um, and be direct with other faculty, be direct with students, and then ask about space and resources and things like that. Um, and then there's the process of negotiating your offer. Um, I think I didn't negotiate very hard because I'm not very good at negotiating. But but I think generally the point of negotiating is just to make sure you have enough resources to start your career. You'll get a lot of grants and things will come in from other places, but just enough to start your career. So don't be overly pushy is what I was told. Um, and don't do the thing where you leverage schools against each other. I think it leaves a bad taste in the mouth. um, and yeah, just kind of be firm about what is the minimum amount of resources you need to start a successful career, and just kind of stick to it. Don't like go up and down. I think it's not very convincing if you do that. But yeah, and then you kind of are done by June or something, something of that time frame, and you're exhausted, but you have a job, so that's good. But yeah, that's kind of a super quick overview of what I thought the process was like. Don't expect to get any research done. It just doesn't happen. Like that whole year, almost, you basically don't do any research, and even some of the next year. It's just it's exhausting. But yeah, I think it's a really exciting time to meet a lot of different faculty from different places, and people care about your work a lot for this short period of time. So that's exciting. Yeah, happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. I think this was a masterclass on trying to understand the whole complete process, and I think it's super valuable for our audience. I would like to start by just opening the floor for questions. If you have any question that you'd like to ask Abhishek, if not, we have tons. So feel free to raise your hand and talk. Glenda, you already have a question. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you a lot for this presentation on the US system of applying, I assume.
Yes.
And it was really great. I didn't know anything about that, so I kind of got a really quick idea of that really long process, it seems.
Yeah, right.
But I'm sitting here in Europe, and I was just wondering if you have any experience or input on how that works, or if you have comparisons or heard, like just compare it a bit, because I think I have the impression that it's not so organized here.
Yeah. So I didn't apply to any universities in Europe, mostly because of family reasons. But I've heard from other people who've been applying a little bit. So don't take it too seriously. But what I've heard is that firstly, the applications start way later. So they start often in the spring, like a couple of my friends were applying to Oxford, and I think that was in January or February. And ETH, EPFL were also later. And I think it doesn't align. I think EPFL was early, but ETH maybe is later. But it doesn't always align with the US system, which is good to know. I think they had less letter requirements, so smaller number of letters. And the positions were also like, I think the tenure track positions in the US are, they go for like you get evaluated in 6 or 7 years. And I think in Europe, there were a lot of 3-year positions or shorter positions, which look a little bit different. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know much about things beyond that. But I'm guessing that the process will be similar. I've also heard in a few places you have to write a research proposal, which is not just your past work, but also like much more detailed about your future work. And so that feels a little bit different, but I haven't done it myself, so I wouldn't be able to comment beyond that. Yeah, that's about what I know. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Yeah, thanks.
So that's a good point. The even outside Europe, maybe in other places in the world, the process is really different. And so we have to take that into consideration for sure.
Yes.
I think there might be certain things that might be very similar, such as like letters of recommendation or the type of interview questions. But yeah.
Did you apply out of the US, Patricia?
I did. I did apply out of the US, but not extensively. But there are more people that were already in Talking Robotics and can talk more about this. For example, we had a speaker, Kim Baraka, who is now in Amsterdam. So you can also reach out to him. I'm sure he will maybe be available to talk more about this. But I don't want to close the discussion, so I'm just going to pass to Akib for the question.
Great. Okay. Abhishek, first of all, I'm hoping you can hear me.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Cool. Yeah, first of all, great talk. It really gave me at least the broader view of what the application, the whole process looked like. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to just start with one. One thing which came out or looked to me was, like you said, like during your year of application, you weren't able to do much of research.
Yeah,
like application. Yes. Yeah. So how do you negotiate that with your advisor or when you're doing this? Because like they're basically paying you for research and technically you're a postdoc. And like, how does that work?
Yeah. That's a good question. So there's some amount of research that you do, but mostly in service of your application. In the sense that, like, as I said at the start, you like want to see what the missing gaps in your application are, and then you do the research to fill those gaps. So you'll do some amount of research, but I think a good strategy generally is to, especially as a postdoc or senior PhD student, is to like rely on your collaborators a lot. So when you're like doing interviews and stuff, like having really good collaborators, junior PhD students, or other folks who can like do a lot of the leading while still allowing you to contribute is helpful. I thought that helped me a lot. The other thing is, I think your advisors have a vested interest in you succeeding in a faculty market. So most, at least my advisors, were very considerate about it. They never pressed me on research in my last year. And they, I think they benefit directly from your success in terms of them getting tenure or them, putting it on their record or whatever. And so I think most people are understanding. I think the times that you can do research are maybe in the fall, like a bit, like you can do research, and then January and a bit of February, but like I absolutely none in March, April, and late February. So yeah, I think just like saying that I can't do anything actively leading is the way to go in those months. Yeah. But yeah, that can be tricky.
Thank you for that. I have a few more questions, but I'm just gonna leave for others to get their questions, and I can come back here.
Okay. Yeah.
So thank you so much for your question. Does anyone have other questions that they want to ask directly to Abhishek? Because one of the things that I was interested in understanding is the evaluation process itself, the candidate. Like a lot of people have asked us in the Google Forms about what is the role of the university's name in the application, right? Yeah. Because not all of us are at MIT or at Berkeley or etc. Yeah. Right? Right. And so if you have any idea of how that can influence and what other criteria the evaluation committee are looking for in these job applications.
So yeah, I guess I'd be lying if I said that the name of the university doesn't matter at all. But I think it matters for the reason that I think this is a part of the system we need to change, and hopefully we will. Basically, I think it matters in that your recommenders need to be recognizable or like known. So it's like kind of a word of mouth based system, right? And so if your recommenders are well known and people who have written letters before or people who have had successful students before, it's easier to calibrate the letters. And I think the percentage of those at higher ranked institutions is higher. And so I think that I've seen like successful applications from people who went to lower ranked institutions or lower ranked institutions for their PhD, if they're able to have or they're able to collaborate with more well-known faculty or more well-known recommenders. So I don't think we look at the name of the university so much per se, but more who the recommenders are and whether we can calibrate their assessment. Other evaluation criteria, I think, are research statement. Like the research statement has to be inspiring and it has to be coherent, and it has to be logically constructed, I think. And a lot of candidates don't have that, and so I think that's a big filtering criterion. To some loose extent, publication count, but more so than publication count, it's has the candidate had one or two really impactful publications, more so than raw count. The letters, the more like the more senior your letter writers are, and the more they're able to compare you to other people and provide some calibration, I think the more useful it is. Um, I think also the more you're able to have a niche, the more likely you're to be successful, as opposed to someone who does dabbles in 10 different things. And so if you've really nailed a niche, that's much more likely to work than I think someone who's a generalist. And so that's one, it's a software evaluation criterion, but one that comes up often. Sometimes awards, so best paper awards stick out, fellowships stick out, dissertation awards stick out. And yeah, just generally whether your research has gotten follow-ups and has had impact beyond self-citing in your lab, and is there a coherent line of research that can follow up on your work, which is again a little soft to judge, but often the faculty recruiting committee will go through your papers and see if there's what is the follow-up work on it, and see if it's coherent and consistent. I think also you want to be either a really good, I mean, if you can be both a great theory person and an empirical person, it's great. But I think half-assing both is not really a win. And either you go you're an excellent empiricist, an excellent theorist, but someone who's lying half in between is not really a win. Yeah, I think that's kind of what I know.
Perfect. Someone else wants to jump in with a question? Okay. Yeah, Terry, please go ahead.
Yeah, Abhishek, I was just wondering, how do you go from as a PhD student, you're kind of working with your advisor, so you only have maybe one or two writers, and by the time you get to your thesis committee, you have maybe 3 or 4 letter writers. And I'm just wondering, how do you jump from that to 6 people? It just seems like a lot of people to ask for,
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one thing to do, and you should ask Russ to do it for you, is when you're in your 4th year, maybe, is to start a few external collaborations, right? For instance, for you, there are people who are interested in working on planning through contact, etc. At other universities. Setting up an external collaboration is super helpful, because they can speak to your abilities. So that's one way to add a couple. And then the other thing to do is just cold reaching out to people who you've never worked with, but who have seen your work. So for instance, especially if your advisor has talked about your work, Russ has talked about your work at a different university, and he's talked about it with some faculty who've shown interest, ask him to maybe refer you to those people or start a conversation, or you cold email them. And I think those are great ways to get other people. So for me, I had my 2 advisors, 2 junior faculty I'd worked really closely with, and then 2 people I'd never worked with who are senior faculty, who I just met at a workshop and who've cited my papers a bunch. So look for people who cite your papers, reach out to them, have a meeting with them, see if they'd like to recommend you. I think that's the easiest way to go about it. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I agree. This is really a time to rely on every connection you made so far.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Glenda, do you want to follow up more questions? Yeah.
Yeah, actually speaking about connections, so for us who are like finishing the PhD and stuff, we have been unfortunate to be in this pandemic time where there was not much in-person and networking events that we could really benefit from. But I was wondering what your view is on this aspect of networking and meeting people outside of this very strict application process, because I think also here in Europe, talking to people, having these connections are also quite important.
Yeah, yeah. It is important. I personally am a little bit shy and I like tend to not do it as much as I should. So I'm not the best at doing networking. It feels like super important even as you go further in your career, just for like getting on grant teams together or, writing proposals together. Um, and so what I've been doing in the pandemic, which I don't know is if it works for everyone, but I just like cold reach out to people who I think have interesting common areas of research, and we just chat on Zoom. Sometimes it leads to collaboration, sometimes it doesn't. But um, I think in pandemic times, just like doing like cold reaching out and saying, "Do you want to just chat about research?" can be one way to do things. These gather town things, they don't really work, I think, but trying to attend them can help. um, I think if your university is hosting speakers, trying to meet them can be a big win. Like at Berkeley, we would have a lot of speakers come in every week, and I didn't take advantage of it, but I should have, I think. So that's one way to like, especially if you can grab a one-on-one slot with them, you can like advertise your research to them, and that's a great way to make some connections. I think if you can leverage your advisor or senior collaborators or lab mates who have gone to other places to let you give talks at other universities, right? Like, so say invite you to a group meeting to give a talk. I think that's another way to get to like connect with other people. And so those are also wins. But yeah, it's tough. I'm not very good at it. um, but I think it's super important. And so yeah, those would be how I'd go about it.
And people are always looking for speakers.
Yeah.
So you will come in as a solution.
And a lot of these schools are now doing a lot more virtual colloquiums now. And like every school has some sort of colloquium. A lot of the junior faculty go in and start their own colloquium. Like MIT has one, and UW has one, and Berkeley has one, and a lot of other schools do too. So just like you can self-nominate too. And so I think it's fine to do that.
And I think that's a great plug for Talking Robotics as well, the best place to network with roboticists across the world. One question that also was raised by a lot of people is the preparation itself for the interviews. I don't know if you can talk a bit about your process. How can you actually prepare yourself for those very stressful interviews that you're probably going to have
so you mean
multiple
like
times?
The full interviews, like the on-site or whatever. So my interviews were all virtual, which I think was actually really helpful. Because I had my notes with me at all times on like what people were working on, their papers, etc., talking points. But yeah, they are quite stressful because you're talking to legends in your field often, and it's intimidating. But um, in terms of preparation, I think the important bit is around four days before your interview, uh, maybe even a week if you have time, but go through the whole department, find specific faculty who directly match with your research interests, go through their web pages, Google Scholar, whatever is most up to date, and read through their like most impactful papers maybe things with more citations, things they advertise as the research directions, or like listen to a recent talk on 2x speed. But try to understand what they're excited about, and then try to form like direct connections with your work. So for me, for instance, with the CompBio people, it's like, what does machine learning for robotics have to do with CompBio? I like relied a lot more on the machine learning aspects and how the algorithms that we're using are also applicable to their types of problems. For the robotics people, I relied a lot more on the like application side of things, or like people from Meki or more hardware side of things. You can rely a lot more on the robotics stuff. So for like literally writing down talking points. I know it's a little bit weird, but writing down conversation like directions I thought was super helpful, even if I didn't refer to them, but just like for framing of thought. Um, and and then preparing questions for them, I think is really helpful, because um, otherwise it's easier to connect if you're able to ask them what they're excited about, ask them about like how do they think this particular line of research is going to progress, etc., etc. So I think that is good and helpful. One question I got asked in the full interviews, which um, is useful to know, is like, how do you fit into the department? And I think that's like a really hard question to answer, especially in departments that have multiple people who look like you, um, in terms of their profile. And so it's important to prepare for that question beforehand, find a niche for yourself in the department. I think that's good. Um, Another thing to do is prepare questions for the department head. So like, where is the department going? What is the growth plan? What is the investment? Where does the funding come from? What is the teaching responsibilities, etc. Like the more engaged you are with the department head, the more enthusiastic you come across. I think that's good. And at one of the schools, at Cornell, I had like a meeting with the whole department at once. So you have a Zoom call with 40 faculty in one room where they just bombard you with questions. And that can be intimidating. And so just preparing like a little pitch for your research vision, like some kind of new things that you want to explore, I think can be really helpful to like bootstrap that discussion. Another thing that I found really helpful was to like write down like 10 super wacky research ideas that just like kind of come useful sometimes. You know, you're talking to someone and you're like, oh, like, what about this? And you come across as like creative and different than other candidates. I think that is helpful. Um, and then take breaks in between your meetings, because it's like, at UW, I had like 22 interviews or something crazy. Um, and so it's important to take breaks, drink water, get up, walk around, and people are fine with it. And that really helps. And even in in-person interviews, it's okay to ask for like a 2-minute break.
Abhishek, did you interview mostly online or in person?
All online for me.
Okay.
Because I was in 2021.
Right. And so if I can complement this that you just said, for some interviews that I did in person, with these questions that Abhishek was saying, it's good to have questions for people, but the thing is you're meeting with so many people in a row that it's kind of hard. So I literally had my notes on my phone, and I would just pull up the next person, check it out during the hallway, walk into that corridor. So if you have like in person or online, totally do that in different formats. This is just one way I was doing it.
Definitely. Yeah, that's why I think it's tougher in person. I mean, I think it's easier to connect with people, but it's tougher to like keep everything in your head.
Absolutely, absolutely. Does anyone want to ask any more questions? So there was a question here that I think it's a very nice one. What was the most fun part of this process for you? It's clearly a long process, overwhelming, but I'm sure there are also positives.
Oh, of course. I thought it was amazing. I thought it actually, sorry I didn't mention that earlier. I think it is like an eye-opening, life-changing experience in a way, in the sense that you like stop thinking only about your very narrow research area, just because you're meeting so many people from so many different areas. Like I guess I met like over 100 faculty probably. And like having conversations with them about your work where they point out really insightful criticism, sometimes ideas, sometimes directions, collaboration points, um, I think teaches you a lot. And it's really cool to, you know, hear the spectrum from theory to empiricism all commenting on your research. And that's very rare to have. And so I thought that was amazing. I think it also gives you a lot of perspective in like how to frame your, how it like lets you reframe your research as being like these tiny little blips that you think about it as, to being like a body of work that is important and matters. And I think as a PhD student, it's easy to like fall into this trap of like, oh, I'm fixing one tiny thing in one tiny place. But when you write your research statement, when you like give your talk, you're like, you can see your work being more inspiring. And I thought that was really cool. And I also thought talking to students from different universities was really interesting, just to hear what their interests are, what their stressors are, um, because I care a lot about student well-being and student like making student life better. And so I thought that was like eye-opening experience for me. And so it's cool. Yeah, so yeah, it is tiring, but I think it is like a really, really impactful experience for sure.
Perfect. Miguel, do you have any question queued?
Yes, I have the adversarial question, which is,
go ahead.
What were you thinking if the job search failed?
Oh. So I think for me, one thing Sergey told me which really resonated with me is like, if you like believe in your, like, if you like believe in this career path enough, right? And you're like willing to put in the work, it'll probably happen in K years, or K can be variable. But you just got to keep at it, which I thought made a lot of sense. So my plan was to apply this year. I don't know if I was going to get it. Apply last year, and then also I applied to a couple of postdocs, or started talking to people for postdoc positions. And I was like, okay, if it doesn't work this year, I'll figure out what things are missing, do a postdoc, try to fill in those gaps. And if that doesn't work, maybe do another postdoc, spend some time in industry. But I think if your like conviction about doing this particular job is strong enough, you'll come back to it eventually. And so that's one of the reasons I was talking to Russ, who I'm doing my postdoc with right now, is as like in case this doesn't work, I'll come spend 2 years with you. In case it does work, I'll come spend 1 year with you. And that is kind of my backup plan. But yeah, but maybe to speak to that, I didn't apply to industry positions because my first preference was to stay in academia. I like the way academic research functions. But I know a lot of people in my cohort of applicants went to industry this year, and that was their backup.
Perfect. We have time for maybe 1 minute question, Glenda. So if you can quickly ask your question and we get a quick answer from Abhishek.
All right, thanks for that. Quick question. You mentioned now that you had all these kind of, okay, this plan or maybe that plan, if it didn't work out and it's a big puzzle. Yeah. How do you kind of balance this with people, because they might expect you to be there or not? And so what is your best advice for like balancing this puzzling game of your own expectation and other people's expectations?
Yeah. I think being super transparent is like the key, right? Like I started talking with Russ and Pulkit in December maybe, and I was like very transparent as I'm going on the faculty market. That's my first preference, and if it I would do a postdoc with you all anyways, but the timing would be variable. And being transparent with that upfront, I think was really helpful. And most people are very understanding in the sense that they've all been through the faculty market. They all know that it's stressful and these things are stressors. But if you're transparent about what your application status is, what you think your chances are, and what your plans are, I think even if you're talking to multiple labs, I think it's okay to be transparent. Like obviously you'll be talking to multiple labs, and I think that's the best way to go about it, in my opinion. Just because otherwise it's hard to balance everything. And then put the academic application first, and then because the timelines for the postdoc are more flexible, and so academic application first, and then postdoc application after, and or industry application after, because those also move a lot quicker. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you. And I believe Abhishek is also recruiting students. So if you know anyone that could like to work at the University of Washington, I'm sure Abhishek would like to know about that.
Yeah, if you like reinforcement learning or robotics or both, come work with us at UW. We have a lot of super awesome people. Patricia is going to be leaving us, but a lot of people like Patricia are going to be around. So yeah, come hang out. It'll be fun.
And I really want to thank Abhishek, and I invite everyone to do so because this was a super informative session. It was beyond expectations, and I think we both learned so many things here today. So thank you really, Abhishek, for being here, for taking time to be with us and sharing your knowledge. And I will
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Thank you. And I will quickly introduce the next session. So I'm just going to share my screen for 1 minute or 30 seconds to introduce the next session by Theodore and Mark from Princeton University about learning rewards from natural language. It's going to happen on June 22nd. So keep your eyes open for this session. And I thank our amazing sponsors, Animata, Semu, and Pal Robotics, for allowing us to continue with this project. And thank you everyone for being here today. It has been our pleasure to host you.